Well, hello there, humans, hippies, earthlies, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you are lucky enough to be doing it too. I'm Bushcon Blitz, and today, by special request, I'm doing the VK3601H. Now, you might be asking, why is this a special request? Well, I take a lot of feedback from patrons, from people on YouTube and all that, but I have someone here at Bushka's house who's now up to the Tier 6 German monster in his German tank line grind. That's Bushka Jr. And he wanted to know a little bit about the VK3601H, and he does have a little bit of pull in the YouTube channel, so there you go. That's why we're doing it. It's not the only reason, but it is certainly a perfect confluence of events. This tank has two guns. You can run it with a 75mm, which is 160 alpha, or you can switch up and run the 88, which will give you 220 alpha. And I went with the latter for the most part. I did give it a few games with the 75, but I found that the 88 was by far the more convenient weapon. It was a big surprise for me, this tank. There was a few things that I'd completely forgotten about with it. Namely, that it really can get out there. It's one of the first heavies you're going to come across that are actual heavies that have really amazing speed. You can get this thing up to 51 kilometers an hour. Now, it won't get there easily, and it won't get there often, but it does get there, and that's a real boon when you're trying to get to a choke point or be a bit of a breakthrough tank and a bit of an assault tank, which you can do in this thing with 220 alpha. You can actually get it up there and get there quickly and do the business, and that is a commendable trait in any vehicle, especially a tank at tier 6, where you're going to see some pretty mobile opponents. You're going to see tier 7s and tier 6s that can really get out and move around the battlefield, and I found that to be a little bit of an enchanting feature that I really wasn't expecting. A bit of found money, if you know what I mean. Now, some other interesting things about the tank: it's right around the midline in terms of DPM. It's certainly not amazing. You're just under 2,000 damage per minute, which for a tier 6 heavy is good. It's solid, but it's not amazing. It's up there with the Churchill 7, below the TOG 2, but it's got a lot of stuff going that the TOG 2 just doesn't have. Likewise, your penetration numbers are not that good. 145mm of pen on your AP is not great with your 88, which is unfortunate, but your promo is pretty solid. 200, just under 200mm, 195mm. I've got to say though, I didn't feel like I struggled pen-wise with this tank. The gun handling, look, the numbers on paper weren't that terrific. They weren't that bad either. 0.337 dispersion after you're running your vents, your gun rammer, and your double rations, which is what I like to roll as my loadout of choice. And that's pretty solid. It's well under the KV-1S, the T-150, the KV-2, all those Ruskies. And you're actually right up there on a par with the M6, which has really lovely gun handling. Where the M6 takes off is it's got really big Pramo pen as well. That's got 243mm of pen. Is that it's a little bit of a jack of all trades. You've got a lot of things going for you, not the least of which is 8 degrees of gun depression, so you're all right with that. You've got 2.04 seconds of aim time, which again is better than all the Russians. You've got the Russians beat for gun handling very, very comfortably. And you've got the fastest top-end speed of any Tier 6 heavy, and that's something that's not to be scoffed at. Your armour is a little bit of a hit-and-miss affair, and I don't mean that by, I'm not trying to be glib about it, but it's not the best, but it's not horrible either. It's the kind of armour profile that will get you some bounces and allows you to brawl and bully the right kind of tanks. But if you're looking for a tank that's going to just drive forward and angle slightly and get bounces, well, the 3601H isn't it. What it does do really well is get out, get to the engagement, and bring 220 alpha in a gun and decent DPM and a nice hit point pool to the fight. And that's pretty important at this tier, because things happen very quickly when you've got a lot of mediums and lights running around the battlefield. 1100 hit points is nothing to scoff at. The only tier 6 heavy that's in the tech tree that's going to do any more than you, or will have the same kind of hit points as you, is a Churchill 7. A TOG will have those kind of hit points, but that thing is just, it's not it's not a tech tree heavy. I mean, you should probably be ignoring it. You're not dissimilar actually to the Tier 7 Tiger 1. You're very, very quick, you're fairly mobile, your traverse numbers are fine, you can handle yourself in brawls with quicker tanks and tanks that can get around the place. Your gun handling is very reliable. It was just a solid all-round tank. I found it to be a really, really easy tank to drive. And I wasn't expecting that at all, because my memories of the tank were that it was rubbish. And I think that just goes to show that doing all these reviews again for you guys, as I rolled back through the tech trees, has educated me on just how much arrogance a man can have in his world when he first starts out a video game. And I think we all go through this, where we see people as doing things wrong, and we see tanks as being bad, and really it's very, very rare that the tank is a problem. There's only a few tanks out there that I think are the problem. Maybe a handful, maybe 3 or 4 tanks that can't hang their hat on something, and the VK3601H is definitely not one of them. It's not super quick off the mark. That's my only negative about the mobility, but you can see it here. It gets out there really nicely for a heavy tank, or especially for a heavy tank that is in a tier where it's going to come up against Draculas and Comets and LTTBs and SP1Cs and VK2801s. And the gun handling is just Jim Dandy. I mean, you won't have any troubles hitting your targets. The dispersion numbers, it feels a lot, I know this is a bit of a funny one to compare it to, but the gun felt to me a lot like a T110E5 or an M103, and that might just be RNGesus shining his light upon me and saying, you're going to have a good run while you're having a go with this tank. But it didn't feel that way. It felt very much like it was a solid gun that you could really rely on. And that's a good thing. Its credit coefficient is pretty average, 111%. You're not really expecting to make money in this heavy tank, but you're not going to have to fire an absolute bucket load of promo either. I'd expect it to hold its own in that regard. There's a lot of tanks out there with far worse credit coefficients. I wouldn't be too worried about that stuff at all. In terms of what I'd run on it, well, your gun rammer, your vents, they're absolute must-haves. And after that, you are more or less just going to pick and choose whatever suits your playstyle. You may want to roll out with binoculars or anything like that. I at times ran it with a, I know this may sound a bit odd, but I at times ran it with a spall liner, because I kept running into SU-152s and KV-2s and tanks with big HE shells, and that negates a lot of the joy when they can't pen you with AP and they don't have very good AP pen. They'll hit you with HE, and that negates a lot of that. So the 3601H, it's certainly no superstar, and it's probably not a keeper in my book. It's not one that I'm going to hang on to, but it's certainly not a tough part of a grind, and it's not part of the problem. You can see the shots it's hitting there are just absolutely grand. You won't have any qualms getting through the tank. It has guns that work all the way through from the stock grind, and the playstyle is just simple gameplay. You know, drive forward, stay in cover as long as possible. When you see a shot, you're more than likely going to be able to get it. It's just not going to be the tank that, you know, rolls heaven and earth before it and can bounce shots all over the place. It's a good, solid tank. It's a fun tank, and it's an easy grind tank. It's not going to be the one that stops you in the German tech tree. Lots of stuff coming up, guys. I know this is a fairly short review by my standards. About 10 minutes is not a lot, but I mean, I've been absolutely flat out of late. There's been some good podcasting coming your way. Eskimo, who drove the Leopards. If you haven't listened to the podcast, please go and listen to that. I've got an interesting one. I haven't driven Russian mediums for ages in videos, and I decided to go out and drive the T54 and just run it like I used to run it, with not a whole lot of heat, where in a situation where I don't really need to fire a lot of heat, because I used to always be very, very credit conscious, and I've gone away from that because I'm just, gets a bit, when you're not paying for your gold rounds, it becomes a little bit of a thing where you're like, nah, who cares? And so I ran it today for about 10 or 12 games, of which we won about 10 of them. And I ran it really, really successfully without firing a heap of promo. And the reason I was doing that was I wanted to test it out. You know, they're talking about these pen nerfs, and I don't have the exact numbers, and I haven't seen the exact models of how the armor is going to be changed on some of the tanks and where it's all going to end up. But I wanted to illustrate the fact that you can drive a tank with absolutely rubbish pen at tier 9 with 201mm of pen on your AP rounds. That's the gun that I was using. And you can still be absolutely brilliantly effective in a medium tank, and that it's not actually a great way. I don't believe pen's a great way to balance the tanks. But anyway, I digress. That video is going to be coming up probably early next week. I've got subs replay Saturday, subs replay Sunday still coming. So look forward to those. There's been some really amazing videos come in. I hope you guys are going to enjoy them. It should be a great bit of giggle. Until next time, look after yourselves, look after your families. Enjoy the event, the lunar event. Remember, even if you can't get the tanks ground all the way through to the end, there's still a huge benefit just for turning up and playing from those things, even if you don't end up with the final result. Especially if you're a player who doesn't have premium accounts, you get a chance to get a whole lot of goodies in those events. I'm Bushcon Blitz. Look after yourselves and stay safe on the battlefield.